What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Nerf here today to talk about my opinions on the current Akali rework on the PBE. Here are the changes as of today, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go down the list of all the changes and say my thoughts on them, and then I'm going to go over what my overall thoughts on the rework are. So, starting with her passive has been changed into a 2 auto attack based passive where the first strike heals her, and the second strike deals additional damage, sort of like her passive is now, but separated into the auto attacks. So I think this passive is kind of cool because now instead of a stat stick, it's actually something that's interactive with her kit. I still think it's kind of boring, and I think it's kind of odd that the healing comes first before the damage, because by making the damage come second, once she does her Q auto attack proc, she's going to get the heal first instead of the damage, so it separates out her burst and her burst combos. So I feel that that's kind of out of place, and I think that the healing and damage part need to be switched. I think the cooldown could also be lowered at later on in the game, because currently I think it's a little too long for her burst window, because she has to use 2 rotations to kill targets, and with the cooldown right now, I think it's a little too long for her rotations. So that could be messed with a little bit. Overall, I think the passive is kind of boring, but yeah, whatever. I don't really care. This new change to Mark of the Assassin is it will apply grievous wounds for 4 seconds if the target is below 40% health. I'm not a fan of this change. I feel like it's really unnecessary, and Riot's just putting in there for the shits and giggles. I think it's adding like less counterplay to her kit, because now if she gets you below 40% health and you rely on using heal or a healing ability to fight back at her, then you can't, because you'll have grievous wounds. And she hasn't really needed it in the past to get the job done, but yeah, it's just a really pointless buff to her Q, and I think it just shifts power where it shouldn't be, and it's really just changing for the sake of changing. So I'm not sure why they did that. It's pretty lame, but whatever. Her Shroud, I actually have a lot to talk about, so I'm going to save that for last and skip to her E. So for her E, they've tripled the cooldown at max rank, and they've changed the damage around, so now it's bonus AD instead of total AD, and they up the base damage. And that might seem like a buff to the damage, but since it's now bonus AD instead of total AD, the damage comes out to be slightly higher than it currently is on live. And now, if you get a kill with it, on any unit, the cooldown is refunded by 60%. Now, I think the intention here by Riot was to gut Bruiser and tank Akali that relies on her E to do most of her damage. But the problem with it is aimed at her wave clear, and the problem with this is that currently AP Akali's only way to wave clear later in the game is by spamming her E, and tripling the cooldown really hurts that a lot. And it doesn't hurt Bruiser Akali as much because she can still wave clear pretty well with Sunfire Cape and her faster auto attacks because she has Trinity Force and stuff. But AP Akali can't do this because she doesn't have other AoE besides her E, which makes clearing a lot harder. And I've tried it out with the changes on the PBE. It doesn't really seem to have much of an effect on Bruiser Akali as far as I can tell. It still works out pretty well if you max E first. So I think this is sort of doing the opposite by hurting AP Akali instead of Bruiser Akali, which was Riot's overall intention with this change. So I think tripling the cooldown was probably a mistake, and I'd like to see that reverted. On to her ult. I was expecting nerfs to her ult, not surprising there. I wasn't expecting to go this hard. They halved her base damage on it and the AP ratio, which is actually pretty huge for her burst rotation. And the thing that gets me the most is having the ult cooldown 2 seconds at all ranks. I think that's going to hurt her a lot, because if you watch some of my montage videos, the reason I'm able to pull off some of those cool plays that you guys have seen is because of her 1 second cooldown on her ult at max rank. And the problem right now in PvE is that her burst is significantly weaker, and because of that she can't kill her targets as quickly. So that 1 second cooldown on her R is really essential to get another R, proc in to kill her target. Now that has a 2 second cooldown, you can't do that anymore. And it just feels really, really clunky to use, and I don't like it. So overall, this is just, another nerf to Assassin Akali. Bruiser Akali doesn't care too much about the base damage nerf because she's going to be relying more on Sunfire Cape and her auto attacks. Her Sheen procs are doing most of her damage. So I'm not really... You can deal with the damage changes with this, with her R nerfs, but I think the cooldown changes are going too far. I like to see them at least lower it to 1.5 seconds at max rank. I think that'd be a little better. Alright, now for Twilight Shroud. Currently on PvE, Akali's Shroud has been changed, so she always places it on top of herself and then instantly blinks to where her cursor is. She's no longer revealed by pink wards, and the duration of the Shroud now starts at 4 seconds and goes up to 8 seconds at max rank. So obviously I like the fact that she's no longer revealed by pink wards, but other than that I really hate all the changes that they're making to her Shroud, and I feel like they're just making changes to it for the sake of changing things. And I haven't seen a single Akali main that's been happy about these changes. And if there's one thing that they should revert about this rework, it should be her Twilight Shroud. It's probably the thing I'm most upset about. What I really dislike is that Riot promised that this rework would be geared more towards Akali mains, but with all of these changes to her Twilight Shroud, it really feels like it's been geared more towards casual players than the dedicated Akali players like they promised. And so, first point I'd like to make is about the blink. So currently you can place Twilight Shroud wherever you want to, and one thing that's really important is vision dashing. And so what that means is that you can use Twilight Shroud to reveal monsters or enemies over walls, and use that in conjunction with Shadow Dance to hop over walls by revealing the enemies with Twilight Shroud. This might seem like a small and simple mechanic to most people, but it's actually pretty difficult to do considering the window of time to get it done is very short. And good Akali players can do this, but casuals really can't unless they've practiced her a lot. And so this blinking mechanic really takes that away and just makes it less satisfying to use. Not to mention that good Akali players can use her Shroud to catch out enemies by slowing them, or using the movement speed buff to catch them, and so on and so forth. But this change really takes away all of that in favor of this stupid gimmicky mechanic that anyone can use, which is just, it's not fun to use. I don't like it at all. The second point I'd like to make is that it's very counterintuitive to a change that Riot made back in Season 3. Back in Season 3, her Shroud was nerfed in patch 3.5 that made it so she'd be immediately revealed upon leaving the Shroud. Before, she had about like a half a second where she was still stealth after she left. And so the reason they removed this was because it was very frustrating for players to play against, because they couldn't tell where Akali was when she left the Shroud. And so this change does just that. Right now when Akali casts the Shroud, you know exactly where she's going to be, and you can aim your skill shots at it accordingly and try to hit her before she runs away. And now that pinks don't reveal her anymore, this is going to be even more important, because landing your skill shot on her while she's in her Shroud is a good form of counterplay, and you can do that because you know who she's going to be when she puts it down. So what this blink does is it makes it so you have no idea where she went. Now Riot talked about how they wanted to put more deception into her Twilight Shroud, but I don't really see how it does it. It just makes the ability more frustrating to play against, and again, it's just like a stupid gimmick that really nobody likes. Her enemies don't like it, Akali players don't like it, so on and so forth. The third point I'd like to make is that her juking mechanics have been geared more towards casuals than Akali mains. So right now it takes a lot of game knowledge to know where to place your Shroud. You're not going to really get anywhere with Akali if you don't know where to place your Shroud. You're just going to place it wherever you like and think that it's going to be okay. So putting it in the right places at the right time takes a lot of knowledge to use correctly, right? Which Akali mains have become accustomed to. You can't just, pick up Akali and say, oh, I'm going to put my shroud here, everything's going to be fine. So, like, for example, you need to know, do you want to put it on top of yourself so you're in the middle of it? Do you want to put it off towards the edge to give you an escape path? Do you want to put it over an enemy carry so you can stealth when you jump to them? So these are all things that Akali players have figured out, and a casual player won't be able to do this unless they dedicate time into Akali. Using a blink to juke your opponents takes much less skill than, using your shroud to juke people. And it just feels much less satisfying. Like, setting up your shroud in places to maximize the amount of potential you get out of your shroud is much harder to do, and it's much more satisfying if you can pull it off. Something that Akali mains can do, but casuals cannot. So that's really annoying. The fourth point is that the cooldown nerfs at the early ranks are really crippling to her early and mid game. Now that they made it 4 seconds at rank 1, it's been almost impossible to use during the laning phase. Twilight Shroud is one of the main tools she uses to harass her opponents and farming. And now that it's 4 seconds, it's been halved at rank 1, she can't really do that as well anymore. And because she maxes the ability last, that means she's gonna have 4 seconds on it for most of the game until late game hits. And her team fighting is what she's always been really bad at. So this 4 second duration at rank 1 is gonna hit her really hard. I've noticed that I've had a much harder time team fighting on PvE than I do on live, even though she's revealed by pink wards on live currently. I think if they really want to nerf the duration, the shortest they could go would be 6 seconds at rank 1, and even then I think that's pushing it. It's way too weak as it is right now. And the last point I'd like to make about it is that it's really just clunky and feels unsatisfying to use. I feel that putting a blink on it just defeats the whole purpose of what her shroud is. It's sort of like when Akali's Q proc from her E was removed. I was pretty upset about that change because it felt really clunky and stuff, but after a while I sort of got used to it. But with these changes I don't really think I'm ever going to get used to it, and it's just going to suck. The problem is that you can't choose where your shroud is, and instead you have to place it on top of yourself. It just feels really weird. The change would be comparable to making Zed or LeBlanc walk up to where their cursor is before using their blink and W. It just doesn't feel very good. I don't like it at all. Yeah, that's basically what I have to say about her Twilight Shroud. I really hate the changes, and I think Riot's going in the really wrong direction with all of these changes. For her changes overall, what I think is that they're trying to kill off, tank Akali, tank bruiser Akali, but with all of these changes combined, they're not really doing a good job of that. I think now that her burst is significantly weaker, and she's gonna have to use 2 rotations to kill people, which takes longer because her ult is 2 seconds all ranks now. It's gonna make it really hard for her to survive in skirmishes and fights because the enemy's gonna have a much longer period of time to kill her before she can kill the enemy carry. So I think what I'm afraid is gonna happen is that she's just gonna go into building bruiser and tank again, which is really counterintuitive to what the whole change is aimed at. And as an Akali main, I'm really sad that might happen because playing Akali as an assassin is really fun for me. But if these changes go through, building her as a bruiser isn't going to be fun at all. So I think Riot just really missed the mark with these changes, and I think they should at least revert her W changes. I really don't think they know what they want to do with Akali, so they should just leave her alone until her full VGU later on. I made a few threads about these. I'll post the links in the description. You can check those out if you want. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.